Hello and welcome to episode 283 of the Paint All the Minis podcast, the show where you can listen to the widest range of guests that I can convince to chat to me about the tabletop gaming hobby. This week I talk to Dave about all of the reasons why he loves Necromunda, the older iteration of Necromunda, not so much the newer version. Not that there's anything against the newer version, it's just in this episode we're talking about the older version. Always amazing to talk to people about games that they love, and it's even better to talk to Dave. Dave has been a great kind of person to have around the Discord server for the longest time. He's such a positive influence, and he does a whole bunch of creative and interesting things. Talking about creative and interesting things, this comes up during the show. We speak about Dave's Grot cast, which is awesome. It's really cool. It's a kind of podcast story thing that he puts together about all sorts of green skin hijinks and carry on. And I've got a clip. He very kindly sent a clip across, and that is going to be the post ramble for today. So make sure you stick around to the end of the conversation and make sure that you listen to the post ramble if you're not usually a post rambler, because we're going to have a little snippet from his Grotcast, and it's really good. It's really funny. He really encapsulates the feelings that I think are really associated with green skins and all that kind of stuff. And his accents are really good too. He's definitely a talented chap, so stick around until after the credits roll on the show and you can listen to that. I mentioned it was great talking to Dave. He's a really awesome guy. If you want to hang out with Dave and also other, I would say, like-minded, chilled out hobby people, make sure you click on the link to the Discord in the description of the podcast. You can come and hang out, and you can come and show us all the things that you've been up to hobby-wise, but you can also just check in and show us what you've been doing with anything, really. I think we have topic threads on anything. I'm slowly working through my movie collection from A to still currently A after about so many films. I'm through with AN now. I'm in AN, so I went through all of the numbers, all of the A's, and I'm down to AN now. Anchorman was the last movie that I watched. And what's coming up next? Anger Management. So yeah, I've just got a whole bunch of movies in my movie collection, so I'm kind of rewatching all through it. So you can come and, if you like movies, if you're a movie buff, you can come and hang out with us and listen to all the movies that I've been going through, and you can kind of give your views on movies that you like too. But anyway, that is enough of the pre-ramble. If you need to email me and contact me for any reason, you can email paintalltheminis@gmail.com. I'm not going to be around for the post-ramble, so let me put this in here. Over the next few weeks, you're going to see more why I love podcasts, why I love early 40k is one that's coming up, why I love Blood Bowl, and also why I love Halo, Flashpoint, and X-Wing, why I love Firefight, and all those things. Why I love the Why I Love podcast. That's something that came up this week, so definitely do a Why I Love the Why I Love podcast. But anyway, that's enough of the pre-hour ramble. Let's go!
Paint all the minis. Paint all the minis that you can. And when you paint your minis, listen to that podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
Hi, I'm an expert. An expert in what, you ask? Well, if this were television, there'd be a line at the bottom of the screen with a fake name and an impressive-sounding title. Since this is not television, you'll just have to trust by my award-winning voice and professional demeanor that I am, in fact, an expert. A recent study showed that 9 out of 10 fans of Paint All the Minis prefer Paint All the Minis to not having Paint All the Minis. What does this mean for you? Paint All the Minis is an incredible resource with a Facebook page to share your work and see the work of others and get tips and tricks. There's a YouTube channel where you can watch battle reports and game reviews. There are painting tutorials and all sorts of other hobby resources to help grow and support the community. Remember, not only am I a paid Paint All the Minis representative, I'm supposed to get paid for this?
So hey, I am here with Dave. How's it going, Dave?
Going good, thanks, Dan. How's yourself?
I'm doing all right. Dog owner. You're a dog owner, right?
That's right, yeah.
What do you like most about owning a dog?
it gets me out and about, listening to podcasts, obviously. Keeps me healthy, and meeting the neighbours. You actually, meet more of your neighbours on the street who are also out walking their dogs. So you know all the dog owners on the street and where they live, and the houses in between. You just don't know who they are. So
that's cool. That's nice. Do you notice anything about fellow dog owners? Is there any kind of human trait that links dog owners together from your perspective?
I don't know. Like, we're all. I think dogs and people are pretty similar. You don't like everyone. Not every dog likes every other dog. So you get some dog owners who are perfectly happy for, they want you to, come and like socialize the dogs, and they'll all be nice even though they're like snarling and growling and getting on. Yeah. And you think, this dog clearly doesn't want to say hi. But then, they kind of, sometimes they get over themselves and they just, have a wee sniff and they're fine and they're not bothered. This one here, Louis, is a funny wee dog, and he will be very happy to see any dog going until he gets to within sniffing range, and then suddenly he might turn and decide, no, I'm going to have a go at this one. So he's a bit of he'll decide that he doesn't like the smell of this fella, and he'll start growling. You have to, move on. But
Wonder what it is. Have you ever thought about that? What is it that he suddenly changes his mind about? Any ideas? Do you think it's a look?
He thinks he's Mr. the Big Dog, right, until actually what it is, he's on the lead, and I think if he wasn't on the lead, he wouldn't be, quite so scrappy-do about it. Right. That sort of let me at him sort of thing. You're like, yeah, that's because you're on the lead, mate. If you were off, this thing would eat you alive. So,
What's the worst thing about dog ownership then? Because there's a lot of amazing things about dog ownership, but naturally there's some negatives. So what would you say is the worst thing?
He's a hairy dog.
Yeah. And
the hair gets everywhere, and you could hoover your life away trying to pick up dog hairs in this house. But yeah, he's just got that rock and roll hairdo that, we don't want to, he's got a proper blonde heavy metal hairdo, and his big long curly ears. So,
just you got to
that's
accept it.
The price you pay to have such a rock and roll dog.
I'm a historical dog owner. I had dogs for the longest time, but when I started traveling internationally, we kind of took our dogs with us. But then as they kind of got old and passed away, we didn't get any new dogs because it's not really fair to them to traipse all around the world with them. But sure. I remember one of the worst parts of dog ownership was like the vomit and the poop at times, especially when they were sick. I remember this one time we had a boxer dog, and she was like an amazing dog, and I was like, at night time we didn't really know where she was, and they heard some noise in the bathroom. So I kind of stumbled over to the bathroom early morning, and she was just in the in the bathroom. It was just like poop and vomit everywhere, everywhere, like wall to wall. And your first instance is like, oh, this is terrible, and to be a little bit angry maybe. But then I just looked at the dog. She looked at me, and she just let out this biggest sigh. She looked in her eyes and just went. And I was like, I can't be angry. I was like, it's okay, don't worry about it. So I just gave her a hug. I started cleaning up all this vom and poop, and it's just like, oh dude, it's like the best thing in the world, but it's also the worst thing in the world at sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, here to talk about the hobby more than anything, and we're here to talk about why you love Necromunda. But before we start getting involved in that, talk about what's happening with you hobby-wise right now. So in terms of gaming and in terms of painting, what you're playing, what you're painting right now.
Right now, I've got two boys. They're 12 and 14. So right now I'm very much in a sort of hobby dad phase.
Yeah.
My eldest son is getting into the Lord of the Rings strategy battle game.
Yeah.
Which the rule set, it looks, I think it was also Rick Priestley put it together. Not sure. I need to check who that was, but the rule set's pretty good, and we've been, sort of getting into that a wee bit, and collecting up, some Riders of Rohan. He's a big fan of anything sort of ghosts and spooky undead skeletons and that sort of thing. So we're putting together a little army of the dead as well. So a lot of my hobby time is either sort of figuring out games that he wants to play, running games for him and his mate, or helping him collect and paint stuff up. And half the time he's sitting at the hobby desk and painting away, and I'll have to figure out something else to do with myself because there's not room for the two of us to kind of sit there and paint at the same time. So it's been good, and I'm trying to just appreciate that that's not going to last forever. Like 5 years time,
well,
like he'll be up and away and doing what he's doing, away at university or whatever, and I'll go back to whatever old men do with their miniatures, and get on to some other projects. So yeah, the other thing I've been looking into, Space Weirdos a wee bit. We started a little Necromunda campaign down at the club with a friend of mine who had a couple of guys that were interested in giving it a go. But we played a few sessions, and it kind of, the interest kind of fizzled out a wee bit. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at that and going, is there a simpler way to introduce people? Because maybe if you're not as engaged with the whole, the whole Games Workshop thing as it was in the 90s when I first encountered Necromunda is very different to what it is now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there was a bit of a disconnect there with the young guys who were kind of into how it is now, and playing an older game maybe didn't work so well for them. I don't know, but
have you unpicked that a little bit? Because I've got a few mates, especially American mates, who, if the game isn't being supported currently, they have no interest. Is it that? Is it because it's not like the newest thing and it's like the main deal and it's being added to? Do you think it's that, or do you think it's maybe a rules thing?
Yeah, I don't know. That certainly is an element of. I've been listening to this podcast, Sump City Radio, that's run by a bunch of guys out in Newcastle. They sound like they are having an absolute blast playing the new 2017 Necromunda. Yeah. And yes, that does sound like the sort of the current support for the game. When things are released, they are excited about that support and excited about what that adds to the game, what that's going to bring in terms of how they can operate it in their campaign. Mm-hmm. And by all accounts, they sound like they are absolutely delighted with how Games Workshop are, producing and supporting that version of the game. Yeah. And a lot of what they love about Necromunda really ties in with what I love about the original Necromunda. The setting, the whole vibe, is really getting them excited, and they sound like they're having, a brilliant experience with that. I don't know how much the current support for a game really matters. It's probably accessibility. Maybe it's if you go to a Warhammer shop, can you see it in the shelves? Yeah. Or if you go to an event, can you see it being actively advertised, supported, or it's more, are the people that you're gaming with interested in playing it? Yeah, I think what I found, the club that we're part of in town is sort of mostly 40k players. Yeah, they've started like a Spearhead campaign as well, and they seem to be the guys playing Spearhead are dead excited whenever there's a new round of. Have you heard of Spearhead?
Yeah, it's the Age of Sigmar kind of smaller version game, right?
Yeah. It's a funny wee game. It's like quite, the formula is very set. You've got like a small board, 2 deployment zones, 1 in each corner, a couple of terrain pieces, and there's like areas that you're supposed to control, and they're little set spearhead forces that come in a box, and that you buy the box, and that's the force. So it's not as sort of open and broad as like a standard, create your own army, play at the table, kind of thing. But they're dead excited when there's a new, Spearhead Force comes out, and they're like, can't wait to get these, and it kind of generates a bit more enthusiasm, and they're ready to go again. So it works for some people. It's really not where I'm at, though. I'm the kind of the guy sitting in the corner, with the vintage minis out, and a book that's like so overused it's falling apart. I'm like,
but that's cool.
5th edition, 40k. Anyone?
Yeah, it's just different streams, right? And then as long as you're happy within your stream, that's the main thing, right? That's super cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you're kind of playing with your son, doing some Lord of the Rings stuff. You mentioned tried to play a little bit of Space Weirdos, but it's not necessarily stuck. So before we kind of start talking about Necromunda specifically, is there any other nearly made it? So if you were to make a Why I Love podcast, you obviously talk about Necromunda today, but is there any other games that you could easily talk about in terms of games that you really love that you'd like to wax lyrical about?
Very, very closely associated with Necromunda is always Gorkamorka.
Yeah.
Which, if you've got young kids that are like, miniature game curious that want to get into something, Gorkamorka is a brilliant game because it's just mental. It's like, the theme is daft. So, if the kids want to do crazy things, it doesn't break the game in any sense. It just makes it better.
Yeah.
Gorkamorka is like Necromunda for kids or something.
Yeah.
If you want to be a big kid, you want to, cram your orcs in the truck, and, the rule is if they fall out of the truck, they fall out in the game. So, there's no... It's silly rules like that make Gorkamorka so much fun.
Yeah. And
very, very open to a kind of super loose play style. You just, anything goes in a 4+ kind of rule. So like Kitty Hammer.
So for people that might not have heard of Gorkamorka at all, like, you just should give us a general overview about what it is and what makes it so fun.
It's a version of 40k 2nd edition rules. It's a game based on orcs racing around the desert, smashing their trucks against each other, and generally trying to be the top scrap collecting orc in town. You collect scrap, you sell it for stuff to upgrade your trucks and buy more boys, and just it's a very fast-paced. Well, it's a pretty fast and frantic kind of racing through the desert with orcs game.
That's cool, man.
It's kind of there was a time when Games Workshop, in between their big 40k and Warhammer Fantasy update releases, would want to put out like an interim box game. Mm-hmm. And Necromunda was the first of those. It was the first officially as their specialist games thing, and then Gorkamorka followed on soon after, and it was in a very similar vein. So the two being sort of hand in hand in my past gaming experience isn't that surprising, because they're very, very similar, rule sets, just in a slightly different environment.
That's cool. Right, so let's get on to Necromunda then. So how did you first encounter Necromunda? Was it when it first came out, or was it later on? And what was it that initially made you excited or interested in it?
Yeah, it was when it first came out. So in 1995, I would have been 12, 12 or 13. So I had only just started collecting 40k. We used to head down to Belfast. The Games Workshop store there would sell blister packs of Harlequins that I was obsessed with. You would go down there and get your wee blister packs, go visit your granddad, and pull open your miniatures and just ogle over them for the the sort of entire visit, and look at them all the way home and just be obsessed with your wee little metal guys. So second edition 40k was a tough game to get into if you were 12, 13 and your mates were also 12 and 13 and didn't really understand the full kind of... Do you know when a game's too complex that you put 2,000 points on the table and it just lasts far longer than the after school club lasts?
yeah. There was a guy that made an after school club here that was about Games Workshop in my current school, and now that was kind of similar, and I didn't want to be negative towards it at all, but I was speaking to a few of the people that played, and I was like, hey, how'd you like it? And they were like, oh, it's okay. And I was like, what do you mean it's okay? It's brilliant. I mean, I do it at home, it's great. And they were like saying, but we never really do anything. And I was like, what do you mean you never really do anything? It's like, well, we get together and we have a chat for about 20 minutes, then we kind of put some models on the table, and then we talk about the mission, and then we talk about this, and we place the terrain, and it's like, and then we play like one turn, and it's nearly, and the club's nearly finished, and then and we start the second turn, and we just start really doing something, but then it's like, okay, you got to go home now, and they said that's really annoying, and I was like, does that kind of encapsulate the feeling that you're talking about then?
100%. That was exactly it, and it comes from, the White Dwarf that you're reading at the time, the battle report showing this, huge arrayed force, and it looks all, you sort of turn the page a couple of times and the battle was won, and you think, right, we can do that after school, let's go. And there's nobody there saying, yes, but wouldn't a game with 12 miniatures each be much more playable in the time that you've got? Yeah. There's nobody there saying, yeah, but if you do all the, the 20-minute chat and the setting up of the terrain and the, all the preliminaries at the club, then you don't have time to play much of the game. So when Necromunda came out, it was a perfect kind of, you haven't got much time. You can set up a very basic table and rattle out a few turns into something that will be meaningful in some sense of game.
Yeah.
And do all your post-battle sequence or whatever, like at home or later on at a different time. So in terms of being able to have a game after school of more than one turn, it was perfect. A lot of the older guys that didn't really talk to us because we were annoying little first years, they were playing Blood Bowl or Space Hulk or perfectly reasonable games to play after school. They were probably looking at us going, look at all the stupid kids putting their armies of badly painted miniatures on the table very excitedly and not actually playing a game. But they could have handed down their wisdom, which maybe they thought they were doing by not playing 40k in front of us. But.
So, do you remember when you first got your hands on it? Do you remember when you first kind of got your hands on a box? Did you get a full box, or did you just get a few?
Yes.
You talk about blister packs there. Did you pick up some blister packs first, or did you get the actual full box?
Yeah, So I think I was collecting. I started with a Harlequins army, like I just wanted Harlequins, which was stupid. And then I went on to Space Wolves because Space Wolves were like the big thing at the time.
Right.
But the Necromunda box, I think it must have been like a birthday or Christmas, probably like 95, 96, and that was like the first big, box landing in my collection. That was like terrain, books, miniatures, like the whole box set.
So let's talk about what was in that. So is that the one with like the Goliath guy, like the big muscly guy on the front, and it came with like card/plastic terrain? Talk to us about the contents of that box.
I mean, I can't imagine which of my parents must have suffered the indignity of going to a Games Workshop store and buying something that looks like I don't know if you've seen the Necromunda cover art for the original 95 box set. It's like these three big, muscle-bound guys that look like they're in some weird, like, strappy leather, like, spiky, frizzy gear. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
The idea of one of my parents picking this up going, this is what my son is into.
He's into this, yeah.
Like, I don't know. But, fair play to them. They went there, they did that. Here we are to tell the tale.
Nice.
So yeah, in the box, there was probably the greatest thing that Games Workshop have ever produced is the plastic bulkhead, which I understand was designed by Rick Priestley in a kind of like the boardroom would like this game to be fought around an oil rig. So how am I going to put that in a box set kind of thing? So he designed these plastic bulkheads to be, you slot the card floor of the building into the top of the bulkhead and you can stack them and create these kind of industrial structures. So there was a lot of plastic bulkhead, cardboard floor buildings in the box. There were two gangs, Orlocks and Goliath. Orlocks are sort of the vanilla standard, like all-rounder gang. Mm-hmm. And Orlocks in the gang tend to be a bit more like muscle skills and therefore probably more combat orientated.
Yeah.
So you've got really a shooty gang and a combat gang.
Yeah.
And the rule books, which there was a rule book and a source book. So the rule book has just all the how to play basic game rules, and then the source book is the campaign rules material. Mm-hmm. And the whole setting of the game, if you were into 40k and the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war and there are space marines that are superhuman and aliens that are horrifying and terrible and ancient and everything's so huge.
Yeah,
you completely get lost in that. If you ask, well, what about the average Joe? It's like, well, the Imperial Guard are raised from a million worlds. And, Necromunda, though, gets into but what about the civilian population? Mm-hmm. What about their lives? And, what's their environment like? Mm-hmm. And it was a real kind of like a deep dive into the setting in a way that hadn't really been explored before.
Yeah.
So you've got Necromunda is a hive world that is this sort of like apocalyptic industrial hell where the gangs that you're playing are, struggling to eke out survival in the most horrible crime-filled kind of environment. It's almost like the game is very heavily influenced by a lot of old Wild West games that Rick and Jarvis would have played back in the 70s, and they have incorporated a lot of sort of Wild West themes into all this. So it's kind of like you grab that and you grab the industrial setting, you mush them all together in a 40k pot and mix it all up.
So can you remember cracking it? You mentioned you got the gangs in there. You got one that's like more muscly, kind of melee focused, one that's more generic and shooty focused. You mentioned the terrain there. You got a source book. You've got the rules book. So can you remember taking your first steps, and did it change the perception? Because you mentioned about playing 40k Harlequins, but it's a little bit too complicated, not really sure what to do. Did this open a new chapter for you, and it started making more sense, or did that take a long time also?
Yeah, I think the ability to play a game, it was more the campaign, the campaign aspect, that you could suddenly play a game, and the things that happened in that game really mattered. They would, change your gang sheet. Someone would pick up an injury, or some experience accumulates to the point where somebody gets a skill that they couldn't do before.
Yeah.
That was a real revelation. That was like, oh, this is brilliant. It's not just, we played this game, I won, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, that never happened. We play this game, I lose, and that's it. Was more often the case. But the same, general who lost the battle and died horribly by getting stomped on by Dreadnought or something, comes back to, play the next battle. It was like the same army every time, the same general. Is there any history here? I don't know. He died the last time, but he's back, so that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But the campaign rules as set out really made sense in terms of, this is like a little family. They are, they've only got themselves in these games. Every shot's going to matter. You could, lose your leader in the first game, and it's really going to impact how you're going to come back from this, but it's going to be a great story. And, it was that aspect of you and your mates having your gangs that have had so many battles together that they're really telling stories.
Yeah.
It was mostly my brother and I playing the original box set, kind of setting it up. You've got time at home, just you and your brother kind of hashing this out, trying to figure out what you like about the game, even if you have like house rules that you never like. There was a bulkhead is 4 inches tall, but we always felt that climbing up bulkheads slowed down your movement so much that we reduced it to, like, climbing up a bulkhead was 2 inches of your movement.
Yeah.
So things like that, just like having your own little house rule for, we want this game to be faster, so we're going to make all vertical movement 2 inches instead of 4.
Yeah.
Just, because it actually facilitates you, climbing up the bulkhead, or, getting there and not having 2 inches left. Or the other thing was that las guns and auto guns cost the same, but a las gun was clearly better because it had a better, it was more reliable. There's an ammo roll involved, so we kind of decided to make an auto gun have a longer range, so that there might be a reason to buy an auto gun.
Yes.
If you wanted a longer range gun, instead of having a las gun, which was clearly more reliable, so you would always buy it. So things like that. The game was always.
And I think this came up in the Discord chat just the other day. We were talking about the new version of 40k that's just been released, coming up for release in June as we speak, in the start of April. And a few people said they were mildly interested, but they kind of don't like monopose miniatures. They don't like being confined to kind of strict rules and structures. But if you go back to that Necromunda era, the first edition of Necromunda, like that changing and house ruling and making something that works for you, that was very much encouraged. Kit bashing, modding miniatures, coming up with your own rules, that was actively kind of encouraged in the rule books and things, right?
Yeah, the White Dwarf was full of it as well. The game, the book does suggest like what you see is what you get, and it makes a lot of sense in a game like this, because if you're looking across the table and you see a guy with a pistol and a sword, you understand if that guy gets close, that's going to be a problem. But that pistol's probably not got the range to hit me from here, so I'm going to keep my distance. Or if you see a guy with what looks like a bolt gun, to make sure you're not within line of sight of that guy. So it makes a lot of sense, but it also encourages a lot of that conversion. And it probably, as well, was designed to make people buy more miniatures as well, because they were putting out, here's a ganger with a bolt gun, here's a new, you could get a blister pack of Juves or a blister pack of gangers, with different weapons to the ones that were in, the box sets as well.
Yeah.
And I had an old Van Saar gang that was my first Necromunda gang, and they were chopped to absolute pieces. Like, they just were converted to within an inch of their little lead lives, and in ways that would make a collector wince today. But that was what we did. That was how we learned the skill of the hobby. You chop this guy up, swap his gun, reposition his arms, give him a head swap because this head sitting over here looks so much cooler than like the weird beardy guy that they sold me.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I think my Van Saar leader was directly copied off a version of, somebody had like a Vindicare assassin that they'd snipped the head off and used for. It probably was a Van Saar leader, that they had, and it was in a White Dwarf, and I was like, I'm just buying a Vindicare assassin. I just want that model, so I totally did that.
Nice.
Snipped the head off one of my gangers and swapped it over. And my Van Saar leader was that guy now, and I think he had a bolt gun instead of his big long rifle. But
that's cool.
That's how we operated.
You mentioned a few times about certain gangs. So first, talk about the variety of the different gangs. You've mentioned Orlocks there. You mentioned Goliaths. You mentioned the Van Saar guys. So go into a little bit more detail about who the Van Saar guys are, and then also some other factions. And then also talk to us about how, if we were to play a game, if we were to begin a campaign, how do we form our groups?
Okay, so the original game came with, there was originally 6 house gangs. You've got Orlocks, Goliath, Escher, Van Saar, Delac, and Cawdor. The recruitment is just the same across all gangs, same cost. Same weapons list, access to all the same stuff. So really the variety comes in when you start playing games and start getting experience, and the advanced tables are different for each group. So the Orlock get a nice spread of lots of different things. The Goliath are skewed more heavily towards muscle skills. And I should probably go and look up this skill table here, just to even.
That's all good.
Not just do it off memory. Escher then are an all-female gang. They get primarily agility and combat skills, so they're going to be, more agile, running in and cutting you up with a sword or something. Delac get more shooting and stealth skills, so they're going to pop out of somewhere behind where you didn't expect them and shoot you in the back, which is very, very effective way to play this game, as we often find. Then Van Saar are more technical skills, so they tend to have more reliable gear, and they are also they've got a lot of shooting skills, so they're kind of more skewed towards having better guns and having better equipment. The setup, you are given 1,000 creds to purchase your gang to recruit everybody. The options are, you can have a leader, a heavy, gangers, and juves. Juves are the juvenile, like the young untested recruits. The leader generally has a bit better ballistic skill and weapon skill. Your heavy can use heavy weapons and special weapons, and gangers are the kind of like the sort of backbone of the gang. You know, they've got a general all round stat line, and then Juves have a rubbish ballistic skill and weapon skill that and a rubbish leadership that you can't be relied upon, but they gain experience and they advance really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. So a Juve will tend to be, after 2 or 3 games, an absolute random. Like you could get somebody who has terrible weapon skill and ballistic skill, but for some reason has like really good leadership and an extra wound or something really weird. So you're like, this guy is, not going to break under pressure. He's not going to run, but the fact that he didn't run away isn't going to serve him well because he doesn't have any skills to hold his own. There's some things in the game that, like the skill advance tables, because it's done as a random, roll on this table. It created some bizarre hybrids of characters that really kind of, in some ways you're sort of like, oh, I really wanted a gunfighter, but this guy with really good ballistic skill. Oh, this dog's.
Okay.
This is the next door neighbor dog.
So when someone gets a certain amount of experience, you then roll on a random table, is that correct? So firstly, how do they gain experience? Is it just by completing a mission? And then also, how do you decide what to do?
Some of the scenarios will award experience differently. So you'll get like D6 experience if you survive the game, i.e. you're not dead. You can go out of action, you still get that experience.
Okay.
You also get 5 experience points for each wounding hit. Although that was another house rule that we made. We played a big campaign, and we house ruled it that you couldn't get more than 15 experience points per game from wounding hits, because we were finding like people who like did multiple hits in combat. The way the combat rules work, it really skews experience for hand-to-hand combat fighters.
Okay.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because maybe shooting someone from across the table is an easier way to win the game. But then when somebody, runs in hand-to-hand combat and rolls well, the combat system sets it up so that you get like a number of hits based on the difference of your combat score. Mm-hmm. So you could be getting like 5 hits in combat and you would roll them and 6 of them wound somehow. So you're going, oh, that's 25 experience points for me, and that's like instant advance because you happen to, rush a Juve and, cut them down. So we curbed that. That was another random house rule, but the way it works, there's like a banding. So when you exceed 30 points, then you're in the next band. When you exceed 50 points, you're in the next band. So every time you go up a band, you get an experience. Okay. You roll on a table, and it's like 2d6. So if you get double 1s or double 6s, you can choose any skill type, not just the ones of your character. There's like a table of ticks of advances that are available to you. Mm-hmm. So the extremes of the table, you can choose anything, not just those. But then inside of that, there's an advance appropriate to the type of the model that it is. And then inside that, in the more sort of like the middle range of the table, it's all the characteristics advances. So weapon skill bonus, +1 ballistic skill, or +1 for leadership, or so those your stat line bonuses.
Yeah.
They, because the advances are somewhat random, you would have a guy who has gained all his advances through like hand-to-hand combat, and you would roll what's his next advance, and he gets +1 ballistic skill. You're just like, okay, then. So people would then be kind of going, right, I've got this guy with a better ballistic skill, I'm going to swap these guns around, I'm going to use, this guy's now going to use this, he's going to be better with that. So, your own gang would kind of morph based on the advances that they get as well. So it tells its own story in that way as well.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Going back to what you said before about how you get 1,000 creds to begin the game. So what does that typically look like in terms of the size of your group as you start a campaign?
So it depends kind of how you want to set up. There's a couple of examples that they put together for you to kind of to demonstrate that, and that's based on the plastic miniatures that come in the box.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got 10 guys on each gang. They don't have a heavy, and they don't have any juves. So if you're up against these gangs, you're looking at 10 guys with fairly basic gear. There's one guy here who has an auto pistol, and that's it.
Okay.
So a 10-man gang is not very heavily armored or heavily armed.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to span the table with a lot. I mean, they're all gangers here, so they're going to be quite capable with that auto pistol. That's maybe somebody who can get up close, auto pistol, a knife. That's maybe a more combat oriented kind of guy. There's a guy with a las gun maybe behind him, backing him up. If you're buying a heavy, depending what heavy weapon you want, or if your leader wants to a leader has access to special weapons, so they can, leaders and heavies can spend quite heavily on big heavy weapons. And if you put a heavy bolter on the table, you're going to find that that's a very versatile and dangerous weapon to be up against. If you plumb 500 creds into a las cannon, you'll realize that was completely needless and will serve you very badly, but is an option for some reason in this game. And they sold a Goliath with a las cannon, and I think a Delac heavy had a las cannon as well. I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually with the creds available to buy a las cannon, or I've seen it on autocannon on the table. Autocannons are pretty dangerous. They're even more dangerous when your leader or when your heavy dies and you lose that autocannon, because that's 300 creds plus the amount you spent on hiring a heavy in the first place.
Yeah, but that's kind of cool.
That's a lot to lose.
Going back to what you were saying before about the narrative, if you're playing a game of 40Ks with say Space Marines or Imperial Guard, you would see those weapons are quite prevalent, right? But to kind of see that these weapons are very, very rare, very, very expensive, that's kind of cool, right? The kind of the opposite.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. For sure, coming to it from a 40k standpoint, you're suddenly looking at stuff that you think, oh yeah, everybody's got a las cannon, every army, going, and then you see that it's there, and you go, oh yeah, but that's heavy, military technology for taking out tanks, of course. It's going to be available, but not really what you want here. So sort of, they put it there to show you that, yeah, you could have a las cannon, but it's going to cost you. You could have something a lot more sensible, like the pintle mounted heavy stubber, which you'll find on the top of a tank as a little anti-personnel protective thing, and that's going to be very effective in this game. So the cheap and cheerful heavy stubber is the mainstay of heavies across the Underhive. A heavy stubber is going to do all you need in terms of taking out the other gang. There were mission scenarios that might require you to attack a terrain feature or an objective. It's a water still for whatever reason. To do something like that, a heavy stubber is not going to be any better than a basic gun. So you're probably going to want something a bit heavier. You can buy a Melta. You can maybe go for a plasma gun or something that's going to have a bit more punch for taking out an objective like that. But by and large, you're up against people with no armor, and a las cannon is absolutely overkill and unnecessary expense. So
let's get on to stuff that you really enjoy about. We've talked about kind of the creation of gangs, and you seem to be pretty into that. We talked about the kind of setting, and you seem to be into that. So let's talk about mechanics and things that happen in the game. You mentioned a few times that you can kind of change and house rule things. So what is it about the rules, mechanics, and the details of the game that really kept you interested for such a long time?
the I think it's because it was written by a bunch of guys who really knew their stuff. They had they developed the second edition 40k rules out of something that was essentially a role play game to begin with. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of experience playing their old Wild West skirmish game type systems. So what they brought from all of that into a game like Necromunda really feels like this was the game that they wanted to play. Games Workshop was pushing to have more miniatures on the table, big armies, and the rule system for second edition was really, the gears were grinding under that weight of miniatures on the table. Mm-hmm. And it really feels like Necromunda has stripped that back to a little, 12 guys, and they've got the full campaign system behind that for the the RPG style development of those little guys. Mm-hmm. And I think the rule set was great for what the dog's going nuts again. The rule system, it works perfectly for this size of a game. It's too crunchy for a big army. Yeah. So when you've got so the way it works, anyone who hasn't played second edition, because they're not like a crusty old man like myself, you've got 4 inches of movement. You've got then an option to run an extra 4 inches. You can shoot, you can charge. Then you've got possibly, if somebody's down, there's the recovery phase after that. Everything as well. It's an I go, you go system, mm-hmm. Which creates its own style of gameplay as well. I've been playing Burrows and Badgers. As I was saying, I was playing Space Weirdos, which are like individual miniature activation systems.
Alternate activation, yeah.
Alternate activation, that's right. Which, when I first played those, I was like, wow, this is great. This is so much fun. You can kind of, I'm going to choose this guy, or, I'm going to do this one first. And it's made me sort of think the Necromunda I go, you go system actually changes the whole feel of the game. You can move your whole thing as a unit, but you still have to do all your movement first, and then you have to do all your shooting, mm-hmm. and then you have to do all the combats. So yes, there is that danger that your opponent can go first, and their turn can be completely devastating, and then it comes to your turn and you don't have much left. Mm-hmm. But that comes down to how you've positioned your guys in the first place. Yeah. Have you held anyone on Overwatch? Have you deployed in such a way to anticipate them coming at you? Or it makes you be a bit more strategic as a group, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And some scenarios, like there's an ambush scenario which is deliberately nasty. The point of it is the attacker in this scenario is ambushing the defender, and the first turn is going to be rough. But the scenario rule puts it that you've got a little group in the middle. The defender rolls for each. They've split their gang into little groups. They roll for each group, and on a roll of a 6, the group can be set up to ambush the ambushers. So the game and the scenarios actually kind of make you use the I go, you go system in a way that that suits you, or you kind of
It's just
It's
different.
hard to describe.
different. It's just different, I think, isn't it? You know, it's kind of quite common to hear people bash that you go system by saying, "Oh, it's dated, it's historic, and its alternate activation is better." But it's neither better nor worse. It's just different. But once you're in a game, when you anticipate that he might be moving all of his guys next and doing all this stuff, so I prepare for that. It's a known quantity. It's just a different play style, right? It's neither better nor worse.
Yeah,
it's just
it definitely is. Yeah,
there's only what people prefer, right?
And if you've ever played an alternative activation system with 3 players, it very quickly becomes a real head melt of who's activated, who hasn't activated. you know, it's like the minutia of trying to figure out who's going first.
Tokens as well.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
It's actually a lot more straightforward with the I go you go, because you've got your guys, whose turn it is. They're the ones that are doing all their stuff. So yeah, I think
you talked about so you got a 4-inch move, and then you got another thing that you can do. So it's like 2 activations or 2 things that you can do. You can move and then do something else. So go on.
It's just like, I mean, if you've ever played like a standard kind of 40k style game, you've got your movement phase, you've got your shooting phase. You've got the combat phase, and then Necromunda, they add recovery phase. So characters who have maybe run scared and are broken, or characters who have been shot and are down, can then recover. So it's more in the movement phase, you do all the movement that you want your guys to do. In the shooting phase, you do all the shooting. So
okay, and so like movement seems to be pretty straightforward. Shooting, I'm guessing, is a kind of to hit, to wound, and then some sort of save. Would that be correct?
It's your classic ballistic skill. Ballistic skill 3 is a 4+ to hit, and the weapons sometimes have modifiers for range. So something might be more accurate at short